If you have ever solved an argument in your head 5 different ways before saying a single word out loud, if you have ever reread a text for 10 minutes trying to catch a hidden meaning that was not there, this video is about the setting running quietly in your brain. Here's the strange part. The very thing that makes you sharp is the same thing quietly running you into the ground. That's intelligence, and nobody tells you what it costs. By the end of this, you'll know why smart people explain things badly, why more options can freeze you completely, and you'll meet 2 men who failed the world's most famous genius test, and then went and won the Nobel Prize. I am not telling you their names yet. Stick around because at the end, you get 2 real, science-backed ways to use this trait instead of being ruled by it. Let's start small. Let's start with a curse you already have. In 1989, 3 researchers named Colin Kammerer, George Lowenstein, and Martin Weber ran a strange experiment. They gave people private information about a company's value. Then they asked those same people to guess what someone without that information would think the company was worth. The knowledgeable group could not do it. They kept leaking their own knowledge into the guess, even when money was on the line for guessing correctly. Researchers named this the curse of knowledge. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. You can't fake being clueless again. That is why the smartest person in the meeting is often the worst at explaining the plan. Their brain has already skipped 10 steps ahead. And here is the twist. The study found that competition only cut this curse in half. It never went away. That is level 1, a curse you cannot out-argue. Sound familiar? That's you every time you try to explain your job to your parents and watch their eyes glaze over. It's not arrogance. It's a brain that's forgotten what not knowing even feels like. And that's just the first one. Wait till you see what happens when you give that same brain more choices instead of more information. Okay, here's where it gets uncomfortable. In the year 2000, 2 psychologists named Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper set up a jam tasting table inside a grocery store in California. Some shoppers saw 6 flavors. Other shoppers saw 24 flavors. The bigger table pulled in more curious browsers. But when it came time to actually buy a jar, something broke. 30% of the small table bought jam. Only 3% of the big table did. That's not indecision. That's just what a smart brain does. It compares. Forever. 10 times fewer people committed simply because their brain had more paths to weigh. Psychologists call this choice overload. Give a sharp brain more options, and instead of finding the best one, it often finds none. Twice as many flavors, a tenth of the buyers. Now here is where it turns from annoying into dangerous. In 2012, researchers Richard West, Russell Meserve, and Keith Stanovich tested something called the bias blind spot. They asked people to rate how much classic thinking errors affect other people versus how much those same errors affect themselves. Everyone rated themselves as less biased. That part is normal. The disturbing part is what happened when they measured actual intelligence. Smarter participants did not show a smaller blind spot. In most of the biases tested, smarter participants showed a bigger one. Read that again. Yeah, more raw brain power did not protect people from their own blind spots. It gave them better tools to defend those blind spots. A sharp mind is not just good at finding the truth. It is also very good at building a convincing case for whatever it already believes. That is not thinking. That is a very well-built trap. In 1978, 2 psychologists at Georgia State University, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, started studying something odd. They noticed a pattern in high-achieving people. People with real degrees, real promotions, real proof of competence. And still, in their own heads, these people felt like frauds. Clance and Imes called it the imposter phenomenon. Decades later, in 2019, researcher Dina Bravata and her team reviewed dozens of studies built on that original finding. Depending on the group studied, they found imposter feelings showing up in anywhere from 9% to 82% of high achievers. That means in some rooms full of the most qualified people alive, more than 3 out of 4 of them privately believe they do not belong there. The review also found something else. These feelings were tied to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and burnout, especially in people early in high-pressure careers. Here's the part that stings. It is not the underqualified people who feel this the most. It is usually the sharpest ones in the room. The smarter you are, the more evidence you can generate against yourself. You can list every mistake. You can replay every awkward sentence from a meeting 5 years ago. That is not humility. That is your own intelligence turned into a weapon and pointed at you. That is you rehearsing a job interview answer for the 40th time in the shower, still convinced it is not good enough. Sound familiar yet? That is you deleting a text 3 times before sending "sounds good" because even that felt like it revealed too much. Your brain is not protecting you, it is auditing you constantly, and it never signs off. And the ladder keeps climbing because the cost is not just mental anymore. In 2018, researcher Ruth Karpinski and her team surveyed 3,700 members of American Mensa, a club that only accepts people scoring in the top 2% on IQ tests. They asked about mood disorders, anxiety, and physical health. In the general population, mood disorders sit around 10%. Among these high IQ members, it was almost 27%. Anxiety disorders were double the national number. Environmental allergies were 3 times higher. The researchers called it hyperbrain, hyperbody. Their theory? A mind built to notice everything can't just switch it off. A comment from 6 years ago. 2 a.m., still running. The brain that solves the hardest puzzles is the same brain that cannot stop solving the ones that were never puzzles to begin with. You would think all that overthinking gets balanced out by deep, close relationships. It does not. In 2016, researchers Norman Lee and Satoshi Kanazawa studied over 15,000 young adults for a paper on happiness. For most people, more time with friends meant more happiness. Simple, expected, human. But for the most intelligent people in the sample, that pattern reversed. More socializing predicted lower satisfaction, not higher. The researchers linked it to something they called the Savannah theory. Modern intelligence lets people build meaning through ideas and solitary focus, in a way our social instincts never evolved to expect. So the smarter brain gets less out of the one thing keeping everyone else afloat. Less reward from friends. More reward from being alone with a problem. That sounds like a superpower. It is also how a person quietly isolates without noticing it happening. You didn't choose to become the friend who cancels plans to finish a thought. Your brain chose it for you. Curse of knowledge, choice overload, bias blind spot, imposter feelings. 4 different symptoms, 1 root cause, a brain that never learned when to stop running. Explaining, comparing, defending, doubting, all the same engine aimed in different directions. And it does not stop at your career or your friendships. It goes all the way back to the very definition of genius itself. Okay, here's the one you've been waiting for. In 1921, a Stanford psychologist named Lewis Terman began the largest study of gifted children in history. He tested 168,000 kids and handpicked over 1,500 with the highest scores. He called them geniuses. He tracked them for the rest of their lives. 2 boys were tested in that same era, in that same school system. Both were bright. Neither one made the cutoff. One of them scored 129 on his first test. Rejected, not gifted enough for Terman's genius list. Their names were William Shockley and Luis Alvarez. Shockley went on to co-invent the transistor, the device sitting inside every phone and computer on Earth. Alvarez helped build the detector that let physicists photograph particles no one had ever seen before. Both men won the Nobel Prize in physics. Not one of Terman's 1,500 hand-picked geniuses ever won one. Let that sit for a second. The official genius list produced doctors, lawyers, professors, a solid, successful group. The rejects the list threw away changed physics forever. Intelligence, on its own, was never the finish line. It was just the raw material. What you build with it decides everything. So here is the flip. This whole curse only controls you while you think it is just who you are. The moment you can name it, you can manage it. Two things that actually work, backed by real research. First, for choice overload and overthinking, use what economist Herbert Simon called satisficing. Stop hunting for the perfect option. Pick the first one that clears a reasonable bar and move. Perfect is the trap. Good enough, chosen fast, beats perfect, chosen never. Second, for the curse of knowledge and the bias blind spot, researcher Nicholas Epley's studies on perspective found something surprising. People assume they can accurately guess what someone else is thinking just by imagining their side of it. Epley's research shows that method barely works. But there is a second method, just asking the person directly. That one works dramatically better every single time it gets tested. Picture this. Your partner goes quiet after you mention a work deadline. Overthinking brain assumes, they're annoyed with me. They think I care more about work than them. Now you're rehearsing a defense for an argument that has not even happened yet. Meanwhile, they were just thinking about what to make for dinner. Same setup happens at work. Your manager doesn't respond to your message for 6 hours. Your brain builds an entire narrative. They're upset about my last project. They're about to hand this to someone else. Your brain wrote a whole story. It never once called the source. Not assuming, asking. Stop simulating other people's brains inside your own head. Go ask them directly. It sounds obvious. Almost nobody does it. Your brain was never cursed. It just never came with instructions. Consider this page 1. The scam only works on people who cannot see it running. You just became a little more expensive to fool. Drop a comment with which one of these hit you the hardest. The curse of knowledge, the choice overload, or the blind spot. I read every single one. And if this explains someone in your life better than they've ever explained themselves, send it to them. That's the whole point of watching something like this. Subscribe if you want the next one. It's about what your brain does with all this overthinking while you sleep.